This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, we've packed a number of shows together to give you some highlights. I know you're going to enjoy the show. Thank you for being with us today. And do we need more meetings? Do you want to be involved in more meetings? If you've been following the show, I just did another show recently on something called a huddle, a daily huddle. And I encourage you to go back and listen to that show where I talked about how our team has implemented that type of meeting. My schedule, just like yours, I'm sure, is crazy, right? It is something that I'm just continually working on. How do I fix this? Like, just madness, right? There's many days a week where I'm in Zoom meetings non-stop all day long. Not even a break to eat lunch. Really, it's crazy, right? And so we're continually working on this. Even, my assistant, is, constantly trying to figure out ways to use my time more wisely. And one way we're doing this, and something that's always needed, right, is better communication across the entire team. And it's not something we've always done extremely well at, but it's something that we are pushing to always improve also. And one way we've done that is more meetings, but a different kind of meeting, and meetings that are very structured. And so I'm going to go through a different type of meeting today and some things that we're learning that I hope will help you. It's a meeting type that many of you have probably heard of before, but I know when you hear that term, meetings, right? You just probably cringe. Again, we've all been a part of meetings that were not productive, right? I was a part of the federal government for many years, and we had meetings that would last sometimes for 4 days that could have been handled in probably 3 hours. I mean, it was that ridiculous, right? And so I know you have also been a part of meetings like that, and that is the last thing I want to happen within LifeBridge Capital. However, a purposeful meeting with a clear agenda and clear expectations can be very helpful and very productive. So I'm going to go through a meeting today, or meeting cadence we call a level 10 meeting, right? And a lot of us have heard of that before through a book and platform called Traction and EOS, right, by Geno Wickman. I think he authored that or founded that type of meeting. A friend of mine that I'm learning a lot of this from recently called Don Winter. Again, I encourage you, during that last show that I did about huddles, about buying his book, Building an Elite Organization, could not recommend it enough. But he goes through level 10 meetings in there as well. I'm going to read parts of that. I want to give him credit, and Geno Wickman, but I want to read parts of that just to help you to be thinking about this type of meeting, right? And so also, I'll share ways that our team is growing in this kind of meeting also. It doesn't happen all at once, right? You have to be willing to push through the first number of meetings that are somewhat uncomfortable, and maybe people don't speak up, and you learn as a leader how to encourage that, right? And how to get more involvement and whatnot. But also a couple ground rules that I would say, hey, set with your team ahead of time, right? You want them to know what to expect. You want them to come prepared as possible. Again, it's not going to be perfect or just feel warm and fuzzy the first time or two, right? But I believe we've done a number of them now, and they're becoming more and more productive. More and more people are speaking up, and it's good. So you'll hear more about that in a moment. So it's argued that this is one of the most critical tools, is this type of meeting. It could be an hour, hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on the things that you add to this meeting. But I'm going to give you a few of those today, or I'll go through at least the headline of each of the sections of the meeting and a few things that you could look to discuss with your team. So the goal of level 10 meeting is obviously to help your team to be operating at a level 10. Right? So it's typically a weekly meeting. I would share with you that depending on the size of your team, if you have 3 people on your team, you have 5 people, even if you're all doing different things, you're probably going to have one level 10 meeting that's everybody all together, right? If you have a team of, a dozen people or 15, 20 people or more, you may want to start breaking this down to per department, right? And so, the acquisitions team may have their own level 10 meeting on a weekly basis, right? The investor relations department will probably have their own level 10 meeting on a weekly basis. The leadership team would have their own L10 meeting on a weekly basis. But then they are also going to be a part or leading probably, some of those other meetings potentially if they are heading that department, right? As well as you grow, or if you have a head over that department, they should be able to lead that meeting. Then as a leader, you may sit in on some of those meetings as well, right? But not always, that's for sure. But think about that. And then during busy times, let's say, in our business, if we have a deal or two deals going on or more, at the same time, there's a chance we might need to have a level 10 meeting 2 times a week, or we may need even a follow-up meeting, about that specific deal, but we may do, have it twice a week for a few weeks, right? And that can seem kind of intense, but communication in times of busyness like that is so crucial, right? So crucial. And when you're moving that fast, it's harder to course correct, right? After, the problem, something's happened and there's been a problem for a week. Well, if you would have caught that 5 days ago, you'd be so much further ahead, right? We all have heard different analogies around that thought, but this is the same way in helping your team to course correct as quick as possible, right? And making those changes quickly. So here we go. So, right off the bat, think, you need to share this with your team, right? You need to help them to think through what's going to happen. So the first thing you're going to talk about during this meeting is you're going to report on successes. We spent about 5 minutes on that. I know that doesn't sound like much, but typically you want your team to come prepared, right? You want them to come prepared with a success. This could be professionally or personally also. So know that. Encourage your team to bring some personal successes at times as well. It's helpful for people to share about things that are important to them, and it allows so much more camaraderie, right? As other team members join in and encouraging that person in this personal success. That could be anything, right? It could be they're going to run a marathon. It could be they're going to lose so much weight. A team member of ours just bought a small piece of land, or a large piece of land, actually, just for their family to go and enjoy and camp and, have a good time, things like that. So it was great to hear that success, right? And encourage them in that. I love hearing those things. And so just know that, encourage it, right? Encourage them to bring those and personal or professional successes as well. What happened? What's happened, since the last meeting that was a success. Maybe you contacted, a certain number of investors, or maybe you all have underwritten a certain number of deals, or maybe one was accepted, or you closed on something, or, whatever that may be. That could be all over the place, right? And then after we go through some successes, which obviously just helps encourage a team, and we're going to talk about key numbers. And key numbers is something, part of something bigger I'll talk about in another show, but where, you're going to help determine key numbers and things you're tracking, right? And, it's going to help the whole team to know how they're performing, right? Even as a whole, during this meeting, it's going to be more numbers that are like a global number, right? For the whole team or that department to track how they are moving forward. So it's just important, right? So that's something also that we didn't do right away. I would say we're still not doing it completely as far as going over key numbers, global numbers for LifeBridge Capital. There are a few things we've started to report on, but that was just know too that you can modify this, right? And don't feel like all these things have to be done perfect the first time, because guess what? They're not going to be. The most important thing is that you learn this the best you can, but then you get started, right? Get started. The meetings are going to improve as you move forward. So the next thing would be what we call review rocks. And so rocks are 90-day goals. They are things that are achievable. They're things that you can track. They're things that are measurable, right? They're attainable. The SMART goals acronym, which most of you have heard of, helps you think through that. But remember, it's a 90-day goal. It is achievable during that time, but it's something that's going to push you a little bit, right? And so a rock is going to usually have like a hurdle that you're going to document every 2 weeks. That's completely editable. It could be something you need to do every week. It could be something you need to do only twice during that quarter. And so you have to figure that out. But ultimately, I think a rock, it really just helps you to think through the things that you need to get done for that quarter. And then it helps you to reverse engineer those hurdles. I think that's the biggest point of rocks. It's not like you're setting this new goal, this new thing that's going to add a lot to your workload. It should be things that you're already doing, that you're already working towards. But I think this rock process helps you to reverse engineer getting there. That's how I look at rocks. You're not adding a bunch of work to your plate by creating rocks. It's things that you're already pushing towards, but it's helping you put a deadline. You're making it time sensitive, you're making it measurable because you're laying out these hurdles of how you're going to get there. It's so important. And when you can get your entire team working around rocks, and we're still working on this. I mean, it's not it doesn't just happen overnight, right? I know the book and Don and his team, they'll do 3 personal rocks and 3 professional rocks every quarter, right? And that's something obviously as a leader, you're reviewing with your employees, right? As you have different types of meetings, how are you doing on your rocks? How are you doing on your hurdles? And actually, during every L10 meeting, we're reviewing any rocks. It's a really quick process, but that's another like 5 minutes that we go down a list of rocks. And if any of them are behind, that person then needs to talk about why they're behind on that rock. And maybe they need something from another team member. And that's a good time to say, hey, John, I'm behind on this, but I'm going to reach out to you after this meeting I need to get something from you so I can push forward on that. And so it's really quick. It's not a time to hash that out, or to dive into that. However, if it is a topic that needs to be gone deeper on, as far as the whole team, we'll save that for another part of the meeting, okay, which I'll get to in just a moment. So you've gone through the rocks. It's a very quick part of the process. Anybody that's behind on their rock, they're going to go down through there and they're going to say, hey, this is why I'm behind on that rock, right? And so then the next portion, which would be like another 3 to 5 minutes, would be news headlines. And this may be, you may have already covered some of this in, say, successes. However, it's a good time to share like what's going on company-wide, right? Any company news, maybe even accomplishments. Maybe there's an employee that you want to highlight, or even personal news, that wasn't talked about already. It's also a good time to remind people about upcoming meetings or upcoming events or things that, that you want to make sure your team knows about as a leader. The next thing is you're going to review to-dos. And a to-do is something that comes out of the next part of this meeting, okay, which we call the IDS time, identify, discuss, solve, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. However, when you have that meeting and you're going through these things that you're discussing things in detail and in depth as a team, as a leader, and even, as employees or coworkers, they're going to say, hey, okay, we need this done and we need to make sure this happens so we can figure this thing out or improve this process. Well, right then, like myself, I have a scribe, my assistant, she scribes, she's taking notes during the entire meeting for me and for the whole team, really. I mean, she's making notes and filling, tracking these things. And so what happens is if there's something that needs to be done, well, we call that a to-do, right? And that is documented. And then that person, it's assigned to someone, right? You want to make sure that it's assigned to somebody, right? If somebody's having a heart attack, you point at somebody and say, hey, you go call 911. You don't just say, hey, could somebody? It's assigned to somebody. It makes a big difference. So you want to make sure it's assigned to somebody. So when we're figuring out or working through issues, or it doesn't have to be an issue, and I'm going to get into that, but you're figuring out things that need to be done to move this thing forward. Hey, you're going to assign that to somebody, and that's to do. So in this portion of the meeting, you're reviewing to-dos from the last meeting. Hey, John, how are we doing on this? Did you get that done? Or, hey, Hannah, did you get this done? This was your to-do from last time. And they'll give a quick update on that, right? And that's probably it's also going to lead into the next portion of the meeting, which is called IDS or IDSing, some people say. Identify, discuss, solve. And so, they call it issue solving. And we have tried to move away from calling it issue solving. And because what we found is that team members, they won't bring issues up or they won't bring things up because they don't feel like it's a real issue, right? Or, it's like, well, we need to talk about this thing, but it's not an issue. And so we've tried to really encourage the team to think about anything that we can improve upon. And think about a process and I'll give you an example, like our investor update process. We talk about that almost every week. And it's, sometimes a lot more. It's toned down a little bit, but we've changed that a lot over the last couple months. But we're continually, by the end of the year, our investor update process is going to be drastically different. And it's going to be 100 times better than it has been in the past ever. But that doesn't happen immediately, right? There's a lot of people involved in that. We want to be as, transparent with our investors as we possibly can be, but all that data has to come from somewhere. And somebody has to be in charge of that. Somebody has to be uploading that. And we also, we started our own management company, this past year, and have taken all our properties in-house. And so now we're operating on a totally different management system and software. And so all of that's had to happen to be able to create amazing reports for our investors and numbers and transparency and all that, which we are pushing towards. But I'm just giving you a little idea there of all the things that's had to happen that we're discussing during this IDS time, just about that one thing. Right. And, a lot of people in that meeting are involved in that process in some way. And we're trying to streamline that, obviously. And so it's not as time consuming for our entire team, but it has to be discussed during this time. Right. And so it's not that like there's a massive issue there, but it does allow us to walk through that process and say, okay, this is the first thing that needs to happen. Well, who's in charge of that? Right. Okay. What's the next thing? Who's in charge of that? Right. And then just walking through what's the timelines or deadlines that this needs to happen by. And then we figure that out. Okay. And then we may talk about that for 20 minutes and then we go on to the next issue or something else. Something that you need to think about is that these issues need to be sent to the leader, preferably at least the day before the meeting. Right? At least, an hour or two before. And then, you're going to have a list of them. Hopefully you're sharing your screen and you're taking notes. Like I said, what we do, we have a shared document with my assistant and I, and she's like scribing on that as we're going. And I have this outlined, on there of, what we're going through. And I'll have the times that, we're going to switch from one part of the meeting to the next. And so everybody knows what to expect, right? Everybody sees this. And I'll, share this agenda with the whole team, and I want them to know and see, what's coming up, right? Or maybe even things we're going to discuss during the meeting. But there may be numerous things that needs to be discussed. Just know that, hey, you're not going to get to all of them during this time. And sometimes this IDSing time, you're going to spend at least an hour on this typically, or 45 minutes to an hour, sometimes even longer. But preferably at least 45 minutes you're going to allow for this. And there's going to be times where you're not going to use all that time. But as you get going in this, you're going to figure out, hey, you're going to use all that time more times than not. So your team's going to send you those issues or these things that they want discussed during the meeting. And then during the meeting, when you start this segment of it, you're going to kind of open it up. You as the leader may say, I feel like this is the thing we need to discuss today, or maybe there's something that's pressing, right? Your team members are waiting on some decisions to be made about this thing to do it. And like it needs to be done today. Or maybe you're closing on a project or raising some money or whatever it may be. Well, guess what? Let's knock that out right now. Let's go through that as a team, make some decisions so we can move forward, right? And then there'll be times where we have a list of things. None of them may be like pressing right now, but often, we say, well, that's not pressing right now. I don't mean at LifeBridge Capital, but I just mean in life. We say, oh, that's not pressing right now. We'll do that later or whatever, right? But for us at LifeBridge, we make that list. And it could be something, and for example, another thing we want to improve on is our investment summary, our investment memorandum, our document that lays out the investment that for our investors that, shows all the pretty pictures, right? Shows all the details of the financials and the projections and the assumptions and the market and the team and all these things, right? We've all seen those from all kinds of different groups and deals, right? And there's kind of a typical process that goes through, but we're trying to improve that as well. And so that's on the list. Well, that's not burning right now. We don't have a deal, that we're doing that for this moment, but that is the best time for us to do it, right? It's the best time for us to walk through that process. So therefore, when we have another project, we're prepared, right? We've talked about it as a team. We've laid out a process. We've laid out a system. And actually, we use Asana for the record, or at the moment anyway, and we'll lay out a system in there and figure out, hey, who's responsible for what? Right. And then it's, we put a timeline to it. We typically need it in this amount of time. Obviously we're going to do it as fast as we can, but then we assign all those things to someone. Right. But it's a process. It allows a time for the whole team to discuss this process that needs to be improved when our pants aren't on fire, right? When we're not in the middle of it. And so that is what this IDS time is for. And remember, it's something else like hiring, the hiring process. And not so much like the interviews and, it's something we're discussing right now, amongst our team. It's not really the interview process. I do most of that, or Sam and I will do portions of that together, but I handle most of the hiring process at the moment. And so That's a process that we have done a number of times now and have figured out a lot of that. But all of a sudden, we need some HR help, right? And so we're figuring out, okay, who's handling that? Who's getting them on payroll? What's their benefits? Who's communicating that to our new employees? So, that's something else that we're IDSing. We want to ensure that even, new employees, which by the way, we're hiring numerous positions. As you hear this, you should go to LifeBridge Capital and figure out, hey, if you fit one of those positions, we'd love for you to apply, or if you know of someone. But it's a time to discuss that. So I'm not going to just keep beating this, but I just want you to know that this is a crucial time of discussing things within the business, processes that you need to improve. And then right after that, you're going to go to another to-dos time. And you're going to really highlight, okay, what to-dos came out of this IDS time? Okay, what came out of that? And then you just want to refresh that to the team. Hey, you call them by name. Okay, these, you'll see a list. Hopefully your scribe, whoever's scribing, has been making a list of to-dos at the same time, right? And putting somebody's name next to it. And so then when you get to this section of the meeting, which now, should be like 5 minutes or so, you're going to refresh them, right? You're going to remind them of that. And then hopefully after the meeting, you're sending, this agenda back out as well to the team. So they have this, they can see it, they know what they're accountable for or what they're going to be asked about, right? In 7 days, or next week, we're going to talk about these things again. So again, and then after that, or that's kind of a really quick highlight, right? And then the very last thing to conclude the meeting, you're going to ask everyone to rate the meeting. And so before everyone gets off, you want them to actually score the meeting like 0 to 10 of how they would rank, just the meeting in general, the productivity of the meeting. And I would say, early on, I would say we had some 6s and 7s and, and maybe even a couple 5s from some people. However, I think we tried to prepare our team for these meetings. We try to push, the agenda of the meeting so they know what to expect. And pretty quickly, like today, we did one actually just a few minutes ago, we finished it. And I think our average score was 8. We had a number of 9s, which was not common for us. I mean, some of our team members are, they want this meeting to be as productive as possible. And some of them, they would typically give a 6 or something. They even gave a 9 today. So I was very impressed and I'm thrilled with how quickly we've been able to have a productive level 10 meeting. We have a long ways to go. We've definitely not mastered it, but it's just done numbers for our team and our business. And having a place for them to bring things up, right, that they wouldn't typically get to bring up with numerous team members all at the same time, right? So that is our level 10 meeting. I just encourage you to get started, right? I encourage you to think through the items that I laid out and also know that modify it. You know what? You don't have to do all those things right off the bat. I mean, if you did nothing but, hey, highlight some successes and then, think through those rocks, right? Create some rocks. That's a whole nother segment for us to talk about. But if you could do that, okay, let's say to begin with, you did nothing but highlighted successes. Maybe you talk about some news and headlines, right? Some things you want your whole team to know. And then you talked about some IDSing time, right? Some things that you all need to improve on. Spend 45 minutes on that. And then create to-dos that come out of that. If that was all you did, after a number of weeks, you're going to be getting things done that you were not moving on before, or that were halted. And so I just encourage you to get started. And then as you grow in this and as your team grows in this, add in some other things, right? Add those rocks, and that's a whole nother thing you need to lead your team in. Is what rocks are and helping them to create those. And again, that's a whole nother discussion for us or another podcast, but I would encourage you to get started and have that time. But think through, hey, how many people are on my team and what's going to be the most productive time or types of level 10 meetings, and is it going to be per department? Is it going to be team wide? If there's 3 of you, of course, you're all 3 going to be there, right? Talking about these things. And I would also say, hey, don't believe the myth of, oh, well, there's only 3 people in our business, so we don't need to do a meeting like this. Or, we spend all kinds of time together. We talk every day, numerous times. There's no reason to do something like this. I would say you're wrong. And I would say you're going to miss out by not having a structured time to go through these things. You're going to miss out. And so it's different when your team members know that this is coming and there is a time set just for that. Today, I want to go through something that, I've struggled with. It seems like my whole business career. It's just something I've hired people to help me with this, even internally, that's full-time. And I want to share a little bit of that with you today. And I want to hear from you also. Or if there's somebody that that you would like me to have on the show, that we could talk about this thing, because it seems so basic, but it's not. It takes a ton of time and thought. And man, one word is my calendar. The calendar is just insane, right? I want to talk about this position at LifeBridge, how that's changed over a few years, and how, if you are newly getting into entrepreneurship or you're starting your own business, guess what? Your roles are going to change, no doubt about it. You better hope they do anyway. That means you are growing. It means your team is growing. It's good things. It means you can focus more on the business instead of in the business, right? We've all heard that, but it is a difficult transition, but it's a good one. It is worthwhile. So I want to go through a little bit of that today, but I remember a few years back, not too many years ago, when we started LifeBridge Capital and we started the podcast, I had a couple days a month where I would record 12 to 15 interviews in one day. And my team, so I built a team of virtual assistants who would help me to produce the podcast. So we did everything in-house. And then they knew, hey, they better have 12 to 15 interviews scheduled that day that I was off from my job 2 days a month. Or else we couldn't keep up, right? And they did that. And often, I would do 12 to 15 interviews, and it's nonstop. There were no breaks. And literally my wife would pack me lunch to go to the basement to work. It was intense, to say the least. She would call it my marathon days. I would literally do that and still take investor calls and emails, all kinds of other things in addition to that also. So it was just madness. I wouldn't wish that on most people. But during the week, even getting home from the job, I'd have to go to the office and do more interviews or answer more investor calls and call them back, or emails, or working with the team, all kinds of things, right? Planning travel and going to conferences, and eventually started speaking at some conferences. And then, that's grown. And so things start happening, right? And then it gets more and more busy. We start doing deals. I meet my business partner, Sam, and we took off. And so it's been a massive transition for me in the business, right? Where, I was doing everything, and then it's Sam and I doing everything, right? Everything to make everything happen. And then it's like, we've got to get some relief, right? And so I had a few different assistants that were part-time or a few hours a week, and that grew over, a few years. I think she provided 2 to 4 hours a week for me. Well, immediately I filled that up. And then I think she went up to like 6 hours, and that's all the time she could give me. So I had to find somebody else. And so I found somebody else that could give me like 20, 25 hours a week. And she did an amazing job as well. Both of these ladies did fabulous. I would probably still be working with either of them, but that's all the time that they could commit to me, just with their work schedule or other clients that they had or whatnot. And then the next lady was almost full-time, who also did a great job. I was very pleased with her as well. But then I think she was more contract type, 1099 type. But as we have grown, it was obvious, hey, I need somebody full-time. I need somebody to help me. And this was one of the first things that they were to help me with, was my schedule. Especially as I left the job and went full-time, it's amazing how fast your calendar can fill up. It's like, if I do not have it blocked off, all of a sudden there's meetings everywhere. It is crazy. Even now, there's many days a week where I will be on Zoom. I stand almost all day, every day. It's very rare that I sit down, and I'm just more energetic. I'm more alert, more awake by doing that, by standing up, and just allows me to move a little bit as well, even talk with my hands, whatnot, like I am now. But it's not uncommon for me to be on Zoom, like let's say from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. straight, a few days a week. And so, but that could be, let's say there's a day of week where it's like one-on-one meetings with many of our team members, right? Sam and I, amongst many others. You have some coaching clients that I'll meet with as well. And then another day a week where it's interviews still, most of the day. And then the rest of the week will be a number of different types of meetings. We do level 10 meetings now as well. We do huddles. I've done a show on those that explains in depth a little more about those meetings and how we handle those. So I try to encourage you to check out. But also, I have other people reaching out to me all the time, wanting to meet or wanting to connect, wanting to talk. And I try to take as many of those as I can. That is becoming more and more difficult to be able to do that, especially traveling a lot as well and speaking at different places, and it is taking a lot more time, right? But one thing that I know I do is time block, right? I have to set some like definite things that, hey, only time that I should have a scheduled appointment is between this hour and this hour. And I have to let the entire team, especially my assistant, know. But one thing I told my assistant up front when she started was, I need you to help me to monitor my family time. Like make sure that, hey, or give her the authority to question me about being at home enough. Am I in the office too late every day? Because it's very easy for me to do. I can just get caught up in stuff and knocking stuff out, feeling so good about how productive I am in the office, and I'll be here, and all of a sudden it'll be 6 p.m. or later some nights, and especially early on, it was much later than that most every night. Now I don't have to do that most nights, every once in a while, but it's just not as necessary for me to be in the office that late every night. And so I gave her the authority. I said, hey, I want you to question me about it. If you notice that, hey, I'm still working at 8 p.m. Or especially numerous nights, why is that happening, right? What appointments am I having that are more important than having dinner with my family? And that's what I want you to ask yourself. What kind of appointments are keeping you from doing the most important things? Right? Those things that we would say we're doing all of this for, right? Our family, our spouse, our kids, whatever, oftentimes though, they're the ones that get the brunt end of the deal here, right? They see you a lot less because you're working so hard, quote, for them, right? Which is just not the case typically. You are doing it for them, but are you really, right? It's so easy. And I'm just like that to get caught up in the office before I know it. Hey, I've missed dinner again. And it's like 3 days since I've seen the kids. And it is just not okay. It's not okay for me anyway. Man, they just grow up too fast. And if you have children, you know what I'm talking about. But a couple of things I'll say that we have done to help my calendar is time blocking. I know exactly what days of the week, what times of the week I'm open for interviews, right, for the podcast. I know what days of the week, what times I'm doing a team member one-on-one meetings, meeting with them and talking through specific things that they're working on. Or I know what time of the week that we're having a level 10 meeting, or another time of the week where we do, or I actually will have what we call some connecting calls with some people who have reached out that want some assistance or just want to connect in some way, maybe a potential partnership or whatever that may be. And then actually lately, I've been trying to block off Fridays altogether from any kind of scheduled meeting. Because what you'll find is, like, especially for myself, I can get so caught up in, Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting, and it is productive to a big degree, I'll say, most of the time. And it's somewhat necessary. However, you still have to have time to work on the business, right? You have to have time to just think. You have to have time to plan, to strategize, especially as you are leading the business. Something that I've been working on a lot lately is hiring a controller, somebody in an accounting type position. And it's been a struggle to get those interviews done. It's been a struggle to even think through this thing we call an REK. I got that from Don Winter as well. You've heard me talk about him a little bit when I've talked about the meetings and the huddles, the daily huddles and the L10 meetings and some things we're learning from them. But it's crucial that we do good interviews, right? And that we spend time with these new candidates. But that has been a struggle to get that done. But yes, that REK, that shows their roles, responsibilities, expectations, and key numbers. That's what that stands for. But it's very detailed, and it lays out exactly what is expected of this new employee, right? And even current employees, they have these as well. We've been trying to develop those, and that's taken a lot of time from me. Or I've not been able to devote enough time to getting those things done, and they're crucially important. You want your people to know what's expected of them, no doubt about it. If they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, well, guess what? They may not even know that you're expecting that thing, right? So we are working to get those done, but my whole point right now is the calendar is crazy. It just doesn't have to be that way. And so I encourage you to think about what are the most important tasks, and what are things other people are doing. And as my role has changed, and I say, we were doing everything to where we started, hiring an assistant, and then we hire somebody else for like investor services that's helping investors to, invest and fund and get confirmations of their investments and the investor portal and tax documents, all those things, right? And then we hire an investor relations specialist as well. And so, now that person's taken all the investor calls, right? The initial calls anyway. And then, and so that takes more off my plate. It's amazing how, there's so many other things that hop in there, where I used to take investor calls so much of my week. Now it's full of other things, right? We're hiring other people or have hired other people, and it's helped a lot. And it's just a natural transition, right? Where now I can focus more on, let's say, the culture, right? What kind of culture are we building at LifeBridge Capital? It's very important to me, very important to Sam and just our team, that it's a great culture, that we care about our people. We want them to know we care about them. We want them to know we care about their success as well. And so we are spending a lot of time and investing a lot of money in our internal operations and just ways that we communicate and learning how to operate as a team and function as a team. It's paid dividends forward, I think, for us, being very focused on those things. But as it's happened, it's allowed me to focus more on culture. It's allowed me to focus more on the direction of the business. And, Sam and I both are able to talk more about the strategy behind our growth. How are we going to do that? What is that vision for where we want to be a year from now, and 3 years from now, and 5 years from now? And we have laid that out very granular. I mean, we've gotten down to many different details of what we want the business to look like at different years from now, 1, 3, 5, and even thinking more out to even 10 years, as much as we can, right? But if we don't plan right, you plan to fail. And so we put a plan in place, and then we reverse engineer, obviously, how to get there. We even we're trying to think through now, what does our business look like at 5,000 units? What employees do we have at that time? And then thinking through, who do we need next? And so instead of just trying to put out fires, right? Well, oh my goodness, we're so busy. Our calendars are so full, like I'm talking about. We got to hire somebody to help with this thing. Who is that next person now? And let's be looking for that person ahead of that, right? And so that's our goal, is to get ahead of that hiring instead of having to hire when it's just madness, right? When it's just too late almost, and we're just doing everything trying to keep up. And so, but that's part of that planning. You have to take time out of the calendar, out of working in Zoom calls all day, honestly, for me anyway, and in meetings, to thinking, right? And I would argue to say that the thinking part of your time as a leader is some of the hardest time. And often that's why we move away from it. That's why we avoid it. Or that's why we're willing to spend time in email, getting email done, because it's kind of an easy task, right? And it allows us to kind of check a few boxes, makes us feel a little better because, hey, we did accomplish those emails. But that's kind of easy work, right? And that is not as important as thinking time. It's not as important as thinking about your business, your strategy, and globally. And so I just encourage you to think about these things and how are you spending your time? And just know, I want you to know, like it's going to change over time, right? As your team grows, hopefully you build a team around you that are experts in different parts of the business. I mean, and we have done this, and the Lord has been so kind to me and Sam and our team, but everybody on the team, they are better at what they do than I could have ever been at what they do. I mean, there is just no doubt about it. And that's where I want to be. I want to keep hiring A players who excel at what they do. And that's what we've had to do. And that's changed what I do as a leader in the business. And it's going to happen to you. So know that's going to happen, but look forward to it, because what a blessing it is when you can bring on people that are better than you ever thought about being at the things you're trying to get done. It just changes things drastically. And it has for me, it has for LifeBridge. And I look forward to the next hire and the next hire and the next hire, so we can continue to do that and improve and to scale, but scale thoughtfully and strategically and not with our pants on fire. Thank you for being with us again today. I hope that you have learned a lot from the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you're telling your friends about the Real Estate Syndication Show and how they can also build wealth in real estate. You can also go to lifebridgecapital.com and start investing today.